You probably don't need a frontier model. I say that because every time I talk about running AI on your own hardware, people point out the fact that you're never going to run frontier models on local hardware. And that always comes back from smart people, which is why it's worth taking that argument seriously. That's because foundation models are enormous and they're being trained on hundreds of billions, sometimes trillions of parameters. You can't fit that on a Mac Studio, and you probably never will. Therefore, they assume that on-device AI is a toy, a demo, a thing for hobbyists, and serious enterprise work has to hop in someone else's data center. But that's not what I'm proposing for Kiraa. Instead, I'm going to argue that you probably don't need a foundation model if you change the way you architect your solution. So in this video, I'm going to explain an alternative approach which allows us to leverage much smaller models to run locally on device. So now let's reframe the question. It's not what's the biggest model you can run on my hardware. That question only matters if the model is doing all the work. The real question is, what work is the AI model actually doing? Because running AI and running an AI-enabled workflow is not the same thing. When you run AI in the traditional sense, you're relying on the model's knowledge about things, facts, context, the world. But that's not all the AI is doing. The AI is also then taking that reasoning, finding patterns, summarizing it, analyzing it, explaining it. The model's size is overwhelmingly about the first part of that equation, and you need hundreds of billions of parameters to hold the entire world in weight. And that means every time you're running ChatGPT or Claude, the model has been trained on everything and anything the model builders could get their hands on. Now, some of that's really good and some of that's rubbish, which is why you can get some really weird but confidently sounding answers. But I argue that in business, you don't need hundreds of billions of parameters. In fact, the larger the model, the more work it might be to validate its claims. But if you disconnect the knowledge retrieval from the reasoning, then you're using AI in a very different way. You're not relying on it discovering facts, you're simply relying on the model reasoning, assembling and summarizing. And based on the research that we're doing, we believe you can get high quality insights from significantly smaller models because of a technique we're using called CAG. CAG stands for Cache Augmented Generation. And to explain that, let's compare with what everybody else is doing right now, which is RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. Under RAG, the work happens at query time. You ask a question and the agent goes looking for information. It finds something, it checks it, retrieves something else, it checks. The agent is working out in real time what to do next. Now, two problems follow immediately from this. If the retriever gets the wrong information, the model will confidently bullshit an answer. And when the context is thin, the model will often go back to its training data just to make up the blanks. And that's where hallucinations arrive. Now, CAG works the other way around. Before anyone asks anything, we build a verified provenance source of truth based on the customer's own internal systems. That means every figure is traceable right back to the source. And then we curate it and organize it and put it within an organization ontology so that when a user has a question, we simply retrieve the trusted information and summarize that into a single shot prompt that sits resident in the model's context. There is no retrieval step to get it wrong. Everything that the model needs is right in front of it. And that means we're not really depending on the model's knowledge at all. In fact, we don't want the model to know anything. We just want it to reason, to summarize and explain. We want to inference over the facts that have been already established to be correct. Let me explain this with an example. You might have Google Maps on your phone. Google Maps, in some meaningful sense, has the entire planet on it. Every road, building, everything is being constantly updated. But when you use Google Maps, your phone is not downloading the whole planet. Obviously, there's not a version of a phone that could do that. But what your phone contains is a small number of pre-computed file tiles covering the area you actually care about. Now, Google does an enormous amount of work centrally ahead of time. So when your device receives a curated, compressed slice, it's ready to use. And that means that when you drive into the tunnel and lose signal, the map keeps working because what you already needed was already there. Nobody ever said Google Maps is a toy because you can't fit the entire Earth on your handset. That'd be a really strange thing to say, but that's exactly what the critics are saying about on-device AI. CAG is the same approach, but applied to enterprise data. We don't need the model contain everything. the consolidated works of William Shakespeare and Reddit posts. We need a model which just works on the right slice of your business, verified, pre-computed, and then presented to a model that's really good at reasoning. You don't need to download the whole world. You just need the bit that you're working with. Now, this work is genuinely at the frontier. And right now we're working with 128 gigabytes of unified memory. And that's a constraint that we're building against. And that's because of the global memory shortage issue. Apple has previously shipped 512 gigabyte configurations, and that's honestly what I would prefer to be building on right now. But today it's just not possible. But when the supply normalizes, a great deal will be possible than what's possible locally today. But it's important to say that's upside, not dependency. We're not sitting here waiting for bigger hardware so we can run big models. Our direction of travel is the opposite. We're going distillation, we're going smaller. We're looking for bespoke models that are trained on specific analytical domains. We're testing different open source models right now to find the balance of accuracy and speed, but nothing that we've found so far suggests the answer is bigger is better. Now look, if the memory ceiling rises, that's great. We'll use it, but the architecture itself doesn't require it. So step back and ask yourself, why is the argument that models won't fit on device so widespread? Well, I believe it's widespread because the frontier labs have every commercial reason to promote the idea that intelligence is inseparable from scale. In other words, they've trained us to think that the capability lives in the parameter count. And the only way we're going to get a good answer is if we send your data to a very large model held in a very large building. And that idea is very compelling if you've committed hundreds of $billions to building very large buildings. But more and more people are realizing that for most routine business tasks, something smaller is both cheaper and often just as good. Now, I'm not claiming a conspiracy. I'm just saying that the incentive for the hive merchants to keep you attached to the cloud is real. But my working view, and based on our experience, is that 80% of business insights for a mid-sized company can actually be delivered on an on-device model working from a single, well-constructed CAG prompt. That's as long as you can get a high-quality cache of audited, verified knowledge, which is what most people actually need available at their fingertips. Now, the remaining 20%, the ad hoc, the novel, the edge cases, that is legitimate territory for a foundation model. You can send that absolutely, but that's the exception, not the norm. You shouldn't design your solutions around edge cases. You should design it for the meat and potato of workloads. And in business, that's usually just summarization and explanation. So when someone tells you that your on-device AI won't work because the models are just too big, ask them, what do you think we need a foundation model for in the first place? If the answer is to come up with some obscure reasoning task, then yeah, fine. But if it's just about coming up with an answer about which customers haven't ordered this month or a simple summarization request, you don't need to be paying $50 per million tokens. That's just madness. So on-device AI was never about shrinking giant models until they fit. It's about recognizing that a general purpose model is the wrong tool for a specific, bounded, high-stakes business question. But building the verified layer underneath so a small model can work is the critical component. And this is an exciting area where we're playing, and we're not alone. I regularly speak to other founders and researchers who've made this realization themselves. And that's a good thing because it means that once the hardware supply issues are resolved, we're going to see a much bigger migration from the cloud to the edge. And that's the kind of future that I prefer to see. I'm Dr. Errol Brandt, the founder of Kiraa. If you enjoy my content, please like and subscribe. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you'd like to be involved, jump on our website and sign up for the newsletter. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.